The stars were quiet, too quiet. And in that silence, something ancient and monstrous drifted from the darkness. A fleet of Varnak warships, slicing across Sector 9 like blades dipped in oil. They didn't come to negotiate, they came to claim. No one had ever stopped the Varnak. Not the peaceful Drell, not the psychic Azora, not even the militant Uthari. Every species had either bowed or been broken. Planets burned, civilizations erased. The galaxy had grown used to it. They called it inevitable. But then they found Earth. They thought it was just another dirt rock orbiting a yellow sun. A nothing world of carbon breathers and primitive metals. One scan told them what they needed to know. Underdefended, low gravity, scattered governments, nuclear relics still in use. They laughed in their death language and jumped into the Sol system without shields up. They never expected a response. But it came. The call sign was simple. One word: Dreadnought. The human fleet didn't look like much at first. No sleek curves, no glowing rings, none of the exotic alloys most species used, just a mountain of jagged steel forged in silence and pressure. Massive armor plates bolted on like it was ready to punch a planet in the mouth. The Varnak commander, Zaytal, squinted at the readings. "Crude tech," he growled to his bridge. "No cloaking, no shielding. Radiation leaks across every engine. Who builds warships with exposed hull lines?" No one answered. The Dreadnought wasn't transmitting any warnings. No diplomatic signals, no surrender codes. Just silence and drift, like a corpse floating in space. And then it moved, not slowly, not cautiously, but like it had been waiting to wake up for years, and was pissed off it got interrupted. "Lock weapons," barked Zaytal, suddenly less amused. Too late. The Dreadnought fired its first salvo. No lasers, no plasma, just old-school heavy-ass tungsten rods moving at a fraction below light speed. Pure kinetic annihilation. The Varnak ship closest to it didn't even explode. It just vanished. One moment there was a ship. The next, debris moving so fast it cut through its own fleet like shrapnel on fire. Then came the railguns. You couldn't hear them in space, but the Varnak swore they felt them. A rhythm, like war drums in the bones. Boom, boom, boom. Every shot was a message. You shouldn't have come. Inside the Dreadnought, Commander Briggs leaned forward, chewing on a cigarette that hadn't been lit in 20 years. "Status?" he asked, voice like gravel soaked in whiskey. "3 enemy ships down. The big one's turning," said his weapons officer. "Let it turn," Briggs said. "We ain't finished yet." "The thing about humans, we never built pretty ships. We built killers. Ugly, heavy, overloaded with weapons systems no sane species would use. Humans didn't care about elegance. We cared about results. And this Dreadnought? It wasn't built by committee. It was built after the fall of Mars, after the Europa genocide, after humanity got tired of watching their colonies burn. This ship was pain turned into engineering. Outside, the Varnak flagship tried to regroup. Zaytal shouted orders in desperation, firing off disruptor beams and antimatter warheads. The Dreadnought took the hits, barely flinched, armor blistered but didn't break, internal systems rerouted like nerves adapting to trauma. The human ship got closer. Briggs cracked his knuckles. "Initiate knife-range protocol." "Yes, sir." All external guns shifted. Varnak ships scrambled. The last thing they expected was for a Terran warship to accelerate toward them in close quarters. That wasn't how battles were fought. Not in this era. But the Dreadnought didn't care about how things were done. Briggs looked at the holo display, bright with enemy movement. He didn't smile. He just said, "Time to make them regret being alive." And the warship roared. The dreadnought didn't just advance, it charged. Like a metal beast born in hell, it tore across the silence of space with engines screaming blue fire. The Varnak fleet panicked. These were conquerors used to watching prey scatter, not monsters sprinting toward their teeth. Zeytal cursed in 6 tongues as 2 more of his ships blinked off the sensors. It wasn't just the dreadnought's firepower. It was how brutally precise it was. Every shot struck something vital. Fuel cells, command decks, engines, like it knew their schematics inside and out, like it was reading their fear. "We are underestimating them," a subordinate hissed. Zeytal backhanded him with a clawed hand, splitting the aide's lip open. "They are apes with guns. We are gods. They bleed." But his voice shook. Because in that moment, even the flagship trembled. Inside the dreadnought, the war machine was alive, not literally. No rogue AI here. Just men, bitter, scarred, and carved from the kind of pain that leaves something hollow behind. Commander Briggs stood still, hands locked behind his back, staring at the tactical display. Ships moved like insects across the screen. But he wasn't looking at dots. He was watching corpses in progress. "Status?" he asked, slow and calm. "Varnak fleet's splitting formation. They're scared." "Good," Briggs muttered. "Let fear drive them stupid." The dreadnought didn't waste breath with taunts. Humans didn't monologue in battle. That was a Varnak thing, announcing victories before they were won. Earth had learned the hard way not to talk, just kill. Briggs leaned toward his comms officer. "Ready the lance. I want a hole straight through their flagship." The officer blinked. "Sir, the lance hasn't been tested in real space. That kind of energy—" "I didn't ask for your opinion, son. Light it." The lance wasn't a weapon anyone sane would design. A focused beam of solar energy drawn through a micro-star chamber, fused through gravitational compression, and shot from the front maw of the ship. It could cut a moon in half, if it didn't tear the ship apart doing it. But it had been built for moments like this. In the belly of the dreadnought, coils began to hum. Radiation climbed. Hull plates moaned as if the ship itself was in agony. "Target acquired," said the weapons officer. "Fire." Outside, a bolt of impossible white light, too bright, too angry, erupted from the human warship. No color, no flames, just a line of annihilation that crossed 100,000 kilometers in less than a second. The Varnak flagship tried to dodge. Tried. Half the ship was simply gone, vaporized. The rest spiraled, metal screaming into vacuum, crew thrown into the black like ash from a dying star. Zeytal's throne split open beneath him. Flames roared up through the deck. His second-in-command was already melting into the bulkhead, and the stench of cooking flesh filled the chamber. He screamed into the comms, "Retreat! All units retreat!" But it was too late. The dreadnought was in their lines now. Point blank. Where no warship should ever be. Its side-mounted guns spun like ancient Gatling cannons, firing uranium slugs that didn't just pierce armor, they pulverized it. No fancy energy fields, no gravity distortions, just raw force and human spite. The smaller Varnak vessels scattered like roaches, their shimmering hulls peeling off under relentless barrage. One tried to ram the dreadnought in desperation. "Bad idea." Briggs nodded toward helm. "Ram denial." The dreadnought flipped upward, using retro thrusters, letting the alien ship slide under. Then, with deliberate cruelty, dropped a kinetic mine behind it. A small nuclear-tipped warhead with a smart sensor that triggered once it detected exhaust. The Varnak ship hit max speed. Boom! A flower of plasma bloomed behind the dreadnought, painting the dark with flame. The comms officer turned pale. "They're not retreating in formation, sir. They're scattering." Briggs exhaled, deep and slow. "And that's how we win wars." Humans didn't fight pretty. We didn't fight with honor. We fought to end things. And the galaxy had forgotten what it was like to go to war with a species that didn't care about survival, only revenge. See, humans remembered Mars. We remembered Europa's orphan screams. We remembered how the Varnak descended on colony after colony, never speaking, never sparing, erasing generations in the name of expansion. We remembered what they did to the children of Titan, how they left them alive just long enough to beg. Briggs had seen the footage once. Once was enough. So when Earth united, it didn't build a fleet. It built one ship, just one. But it was the kind of ship that ended bloodlines. And now the galaxy saw it. The Varnak fleet was down to a third of its original size. Most were either dead or drifting. Fires crawled along their hulls like disease. The dreadnought circled them like a wolf, slow, deliberate, brutal. "We're receiving a signal," the comms officer said, confused, "from the remains of their flagship." "Put it on," Briggs said, lighting his dead cigarette out of habit. The voice crackled in through static, raspy, wounded, unsteady. "This is Zaytal, commander of the Varnak Dominion." He coughed, wet and thick. "We request ceasefire, opening diplomatic channel." Briggs didn't blink. "Translate to Varnak. You came to take, we came to return the favor." He nodded to his officer. "Fire main battery." "Sir, they're surrendering." Did Mars surrender? Silence. The main guns flared. The flagship finally shattered into atoms, sucked into the void like it had never existed. No cries, no begging, just justice in fire and steel. And then, silence again. The battlefield was still. Alien wreckage drifted around the dreadnought like broken dreams. Bodies floated, flames flickered out. Briggs stood over it all, arms crossed, cigarette dangling. "Send the footage to command," he said. "Let Earth see what happens when someone picks a fight with the wrong species." "Yes, sir." He walked off the bridge. No applause, no cheers, just the low hum of the beast he commanded. Because to him, this wasn't victory. It was debt collection. The wreckage hadn't even cooled when the first interstellar broadcast went out. Every listening post, every species with a working comm array, got the feed. Not from Earth, not from any government. It came from an old colonial satellite orbiting Jupiter, scavenged and reprogrammed to ping every known frequency. No encryption. No attempt to filter it. It played the footage raw. The Varnak fleet, arrogant and slow, descending like gods. And then the dreadnought, silent, monstrous, bleeding thruster fire and hate. A one-sided slaughter, edited by reality itself. No propaganda, no commentary, just destruction. Real time. Brutal. Unmistakable. The galaxy watched in silence. Whole planets paused. Fleets stopped mid-exercise. Even the Kraith Syndicate, known cannibals of the Targon Belt, halted their raids just to watch the 10-minute clip on loop. And every time it ended, one truth repeated itself. Humans aren't supposed to be this dangerous. They were supposed to be wild, primitive, disorganized. Not this. Not that. The High Council of Zoltran Prime met in an emergency session, something they hadn't done in 7 centuries. Their leader, a photosynthetic being who hadn't blinked in over 2 decades, demanded answers. "This vessel," he hissed, Was it the sum of their fleet? No, Supreme One, a scientist muttered. It was a prototype, likely the first of several. Then we are all already dead. Farther out, on the frozen moon of Harlech's grave, the pirate lords began purging any human prisoners they held, not out of hatred, out of fear. We kill 'em now, said one captain, before Earth sends that ship here looking for 'em. They didn't even argue. They just obeyed. Back aboard the dreadnought, the aftermath felt hollow. Briggs sat in the captain's quarters. The lights were dim. A small metal flask rested by his hand, untouched. He didn't drink. He carried it for the same reason he carried the unlit cigarette in his mouth. Reminders of things long gone. His room was clean, too clean. No pictures, no medals, no color, just steel walls and silence. The door hissed open. Lieutenant Harrow stepped in, stiff-backed, young, new. Eyes not yet broken by war, but the cracks were starting. "Sir," he said, unsure if he was interrupting anything. Briggs didn't look up. "What is it?" "Transmission from Earth. High Command wants a full report." They got the footage. "They want your interpretation." Briggs finally looked at him. His face was weathered, lined like carved stone, eyes dull but sharp at the same time. "They want me to tell them what they already saw?" "They want to know why you didn't accept the surrender." Briggs exhaled through his nose, a sound like dry gravel shifting. "Tell them I remembered Titan. That's all they need to know." "Yes, sir." Briggs turned back to the blank screen on the wall. He didn't press it. He just stared into it, like it might show him something if he waited long enough. "Anything else?" Harrow hesitated. "Morale is complicated, sir." "How so?" "The crew's split. Some feel proud, like we did something right. Others feel like we went too far." Briggs almost smiled. Almost. "They don't get it yet. They will." Harrow didn't reply. Briggs turned to him again. "Let me tell you something, Lieutenant. You ever see your home planet burn?" "No, sir." "I did. I was 12. I watched Europa's sky turn black while we hid in a water tank. My sister was 5. She cried without sound. You know what that sounds like?" Harrow didn't answer. "Exactly," Briggs said. "There's a kind of silence worse than screams, and that's what they gave us. So now we give it back." He stood up, towering over the younger officer. "Tell the crew this isn't over. Tell them to clean the blood off the deck plates and be ready, because this was just the opening act." 3 days later, the galaxy finally spoke back. It wasn't the Varnak. They were shattered. What was left of their command was in hiding, too ashamed to speak. It was the Jareen Collective. Peaceful, rich, old, one of the founding members of the Interstellar Accords. They'd watched the footage with horror, but they weren't fools. They knew power when they saw it. Their ambassador transmitted directly to Earth's new unified command. "We wish to establish formal diplomatic relations and enter trade negotiations immediately," they said. Earth didn't respond with words. It sent schematics, not for weapons, for farming tech, clean energy systems, disease-resistant crops, artificial gravity solutions. And just like that, Earth flipped the script. The galaxy expected monsters. They got humanity with leverage. The dreadnought wasn't just a weapon. It was a message. "We can destroy you, but we'd rather not. Your choice." More species followed. Even those who once preyed on human colonies were crawling back with apologies and treaties. But it wasn't all peace. In the shadows of the galactic underworld, whispers grew louder. "If that's what one Terran ship can do," one mercenary leader hissed, "what happens when they build 10? They won't, another said. Earth doesn't have the resources. You want to bet your homeworld on that? The Varnak survivors fled to the outer rim, trying to regroup, trying to understand what went wrong. They sent spies, scouts, anything to make sense of what kind of species they'd poked. One came back. Barely. He was missing an arm. His jaw was sealed with melted metal. But he lived long enough to mutter a few words before dying. Humans don't fight for glory. They fight like they've got nothing left to lose. The Varnak command fell silent, because that was the truth. No religion, no emperor, no code. Just pain turned into purpose. Back on the dreadnought, the repairs were complete, armor patched, guns reloaded, systems green. The ship hung in orbit over the ruins of the last Varnak outpost in Sector 9. A message beacon floated nearby, repeating a simple message. Sector liberated. By Earth. Keep moving. Briggs stood on the observation deck, watching the stars. Harrow joined him. Orders came through. Where to? Kepler 6. Pirate colony refusing to release human prisoners. Command says show of force. Briggs nodded. How many? 53 prisoners, mostly civilians. Briggs clenched his jaw. Spin up the main guns. Sir? We're not negotiating. Yes, sir. As Harrow walked off, Briggs lit the dead cigarette for the first time in 20 years. The flame danced. He stared at it like an old friend. You thought we were weak, he whispered to the stars. You thought we forgot how to be cruel. He flicked the flame out. We remembered. They thought the dreadnought was just a weapon, a machine, a product of Earth's rage. But it wasn't. It was a coffin wrapped in steel. Every bulkhead, every corridor, every deck was named after something. Titan's last nursery, Europa's mass grave, Mars' blackout zone. The walls didn't have designations. They had memorials. The entire ship was a floating grave marker, and no one who served on it could forget that. You didn't get posted to the dreadnought because you were elite. You got posted because you had nothing left. Briggs sat alone in the dark. The flame of his cigarette flickered, the smoke curling toward the vent system like it wanted to escape as badly as the ghosts in his head. A screen flickered on beside him. An old woman's face appeared. She looked like she hadn't aged in a century, but not because of youth, because grief froze her. Commander, she said, voice sharp. Admiral, you went off protocol again. Briggs didn't respond. You were supposed to hold orbit, not vaporize a pirate city. They were executing children on camera, Briggs said, to send us a message. There were civilians in those domes. There were bodies in cages. Silence. The woman leaned forward slightly, like even through the screen she needed to close the distance. This isn't just war anymore, she said. No, Briggs agreed. It's punishment. You're making enemies faster than we can count allies. We're making examples. She rubbed her temples. You think we can survive that way? Briggs leaned in, shadow swallowing half his face. No, he said, but we can make sure they remember us longer than their own ancestors. On the edge of the Terran expanse, something ancient stirred. The Sindari. Not conquerors, not traders, not even warriors, watchers. For 10,000 years they had stayed silent, watching species rise and fall, observing, recording, never interfering, never reacting. Until now. The dreadnought had changed something. A weapon like that wasn't supposed to exist. Not in this cycle. Not after the Treaty of Galactic Containment. Not after the last Terran war millennia ago. The Sindri High Observer opened the old files. They weren't labeled Earth. Back then, humans hadn't been humans. They had been Origin Class Species 7A. The notes were chilling. Emotion-driven biology. Rapid aggressive adaptation. Technological acceleration under duress. Uncontrollable grief-based violence. The file ended with one line, sealed in red. Should extinction be incomplete, quarantine and suppress all contact. Risk level, terminal. But the quarantine had failed. Earth had risen again. And worse, they had remembered how to build monsters. The High Observer stood before the quiet council and whispered, "It's starting again." Back aboard the dreadnought, Harrow couldn't sleep. It wasn't nightmares, it was the noise. Not in his head, not in his ears, but in the walls. He heard it when the lights went low. Like breathing. Like footsteps where no one walked. The veterans ignored it. Some even talked back to it. "Titan's voice," they called it. Harrow asked once. Only once. The chief engineer, a man with oil-stained skin and eyes like burnt coals, just said, "This ship was built on screams, son." Screams don't fade. He didn't ask again. Instead, he walked the halls. The lower decks were worse. Darker. Colder. He passed by rooms sealed shut with welds, not locks. Names scrawled on them in ash. One read, Ava. She was only 6. He kept walking. At last, he reached a sealed section marked Deck M Systems Core. No one went there. It wasn't restricted, but everyone understood. Harrow stepped inside. And stopped. The lights here didn't flicker like the rest of the ship. They were steady. Red. Unforgiving. And at the far end of the corridor was a terminal no one used, but it blinked, awaiting input. He stepped closer. The screen pulsed once, and words appeared. "Welcome back, Briggs." Harrow froze. I know. More words. You're still listening. That means you're still human." "What is this?" Harrow whispered. "Pain recorder." The screen changed again. Faces now. Thousands. Each flashed for only a second. Every soul this ship remembers. Every death it was built for. He tried to step back. The terminal beeped once. "Leave now, or you'll hear them too." And then he did hear them. Voices, screaming, begging, children, mothers, soldiers whispering final words. All of them. Human. He stumbled backward out of the corridor and slammed the door shut. The dreadnought's lights flickered. Once. Like it had watched him. Meanwhile, far from Earth, on the forgotten world of Korvax II, a Sindari agent walked into a black vault untouched for 4,000 years. Inside it was a corpse. Not just any corpse. A Terran from the first human war, when they had burned across 5 star systems before being wiped out. Or so they thought. The body was fossilized, armored in ancient steel, and wrapped in nanofiber cloth that hadn't degraded. But its eyes, they were still open. And when the Sindari leaned in to scan it, its heart blinked. Just once. Enough to send terror up his spine. Enough to realize the war wasn't over. It had just gone dormant. Briggs stood in the dreadnought's hangar, watching technicians refit the missile racks. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. A Marine approached, face still bloody from the last skirmish. "Sir, there's talk coming in from the outer colonies." "What kind of talk?" "People are rallying. Not just humans, slaves, refugees, forgotten species." Briggs turned slightly. "They think Earth might be the one to burn the hierarchy down." Briggs chewed on that. "Let them think it," he said. "Hope is useful, until it turns into something dangerous." He looked out at the stars. Then we put it down. The Marine hesitated. Even if they're fighting for us? Briggs narrowed his eyes. No one fights for us. They fight for themselves. We just happen to be the loudest weapon in the room. Back on Earth, Command watched the spread of fear. But they also watched the rise of something else. Faith. Not in God, not in religion, in the dreadnought. People wore its shape on necklaces, painted it on walls. Children carved it in the dirt. To them, it wasn't a ship. It was revenge incarnate. Politicians tried to spin it, brand it, profit from it. But the truth was simpler. It wasn't built by a government. It was built by people who had nothing left to lose. Exiles, prisoners, scientists whose families had been bombed off the record, engineers who built weapons because the pain was too big to carry any other way. They didn't build it to protect Earth. They built it so Earth would never beg again. And now, the stars were listening and trembling. They called it the Council of Restraint, a desperate gathering of 38 species across 3 quadrants, huddled in fear over one shared name. Earth. They met in the core system of Cyrillus Theta, neutral ground since the Second Galactic Peace. Every major power sent a delegate, though most of them arrived in armed escorts, like the humans might strike even here. At the center of the marble chamber stood High Minister Corel of the Elvery Dominion, a species known for cold diplomacy and precise words. He struck the floor once with a ceremonial rod. "We are here," he announced, "not to declare war, but to prevent one." Murmurs, whispers, some angry, some terrified. A Kraith general snarled, his eyes glowing through his war helm. The Terran vessel dismantled the Varnic armada in under 7 minutes. That was not war, that was execution. An Azoran ambassador floated gently in zero gravity beside him. Execution, yes, but not unprovoked. They crossed the Sol line, someone hissed. They did not warn Earth before they attacked. They didn't need to. Earth was primitive, disorganized, no threat. Clearly that's no longer true. The room broke into shouting. Corel raised the rod again. Enough. He turned to the towering display screen, now showing an image of the dreadnought. A vessel of jagged iron and terrifying symmetry. Its gun batteries looked like angry teeth. Its engine trails pulsed like a dying star's heartbeat. This is not just a battleship," he said. "It is a message. And unless we answer that message together, the humans will set the tone for the next 1,000 years." No one disagreed. But no one knew what to do, because the dreadnought wasn't just steel, it was a symbol of a species that had lost everything, and then figured out how to weaponize that loss. You can negotiate with empires, but you can't reason with grief, so they devised a plan, not war, sabotage. Inside the dreadnought, the crew was growing restless. It wasn't fatigue. These weren't soldiers who got tired. They were survivors, broken things wearing uniforms. Fatigue didn't touch them. It was tension. They'd heard whispers about the Council of Restraint. They didn't need official confirmation. They could feel it in the stars. Something was building. Briggs stood in the war room, staring at the new reports. Not military, not strategic, economic. Worlds were cutting off trade. Fuel routes were being re-evaluated. Weapon shipments delayed. Earth wasn't under siege, not yet. But it was being choked, slowly, quietly. "Diplomatic strangulation," said Harrow, reading over his shoulder. "They're trying to bleed us out without firing a shot." Briggs didn't look up. "It won't work." "How do you know?" "Because they're not dealing with Earth." He tapped the hull of the ship. "They're dealing with us." Meanwhile, in orbit around Earth, a small shuttle docked with the military platform Achilles Reach. Aboard it was a man named Riker Dahl, politician, peace negotiator, former defense minister. He was also a traitor, not in the loud, dramatic sense, He didn't sell out Earth for money, or out of hate. He did it because he believed Earth had become the monster. "The dreadnought has to be destroyed," he said to the cloaked figure seated across from him inside the platform's comms room. The figure didn't reply, only nodded once. "Not by enemies," Riker continued. "By humans, internally, from the inside. If we don't, this warship becomes our identity." Still silence. "I have access," Riker said. "I know where the launch codes are mirrored. I know their resupply routes. Just promise me you'll do it clean." The cindery agent leaned forward, eyes shimmering with lightless energy. "We do nothing clean," it said. On the dreadnought, Briggs received the warning 2 days before the sabotage began. Encrypted, untraceable. One line. "Check your oxygen." He didn't panic. He walked calmly down to engineering. Inside, Chief Ames, an old woman with one cybernetic leg and half a jaw, greeted him with a nod. "Running diagnostics?" "No," Briggs said. "We've got a rat." Ames's smile disappeared. Together they checked the scrubbers, every tank, every microfiltration system. Someone had planted nanospore bioagents, undetectable to basic scans, designed to weaken muscle response, kill judgment, create mistakes in high-stress combat, not instantly, slowly, quietly. Briggs stood in the dark as Ames activated a sterilizer drone. "They're scared of us," she muttered. "No," Briggs said. "They're scared of what we're reminding them of." "Which is?" "That humans don't need gods. We become our own when you take everything else away." The saboteur was found hiding near the water processing chamber. He didn't cry. He didn't beg. He just stared at Briggs and said, "We're the problem now." Briggs pulled his sidearm and shot him once in the leg, then once in the other. "You want to talk?" Briggs asked, voice cold. "You get to live long enough to say it while you're bleeding out." The crew dragged the man to the brig, leaving a trail behind him. Harrow watched it happen. He didn't say anything. He wanted to. But deep down, he understood it. Because the dreadnought wasn't just a ship anymore. It was a wound. And you didn't clean wounds with kindness. You cauterized them. Earth retaliated. Not with ships, not with soldiers, with releases, dossiers, logs, footage, everything the Varnak ever did to their colonies, unfiltered, uncut, no edits, children starving in cages, corpses frozen in rows, soldiers screaming into malfunctioning radios as alien blades carved through steel walls. It wasn't propaganda. It was memory. The galaxy read it, watched it, and then they went quiet. Because for all their diplomacy, they'd never seen grief laid bare like this. And now it was coming for them with railguns. Meanwhile, at the edge of the Draxan Rift, a secret flotilla moved into position. Not a fleet, not official. Just 28 warships from different species, unmarked, unofficial, unclaimed. Their mission was simple. Find the dreadnought. Destroy it. Make it look like an accident. No trace, no claims, no accountability. They thought they were hunting a weapon. They didn't realize they were walking into a graveyard with a name. The dreadnought picked up the signals 3 hours before contact. Briggs didn't flinch. "Wake the ship," he said. Harrow blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means drop the masks. No more diplomacy, no more pretending." The lights dimmed, the corridors whispered, and the guns began to hum. One by one, across the black, the unmarked ships began to break position. A single line of fire stretched from the dreadnought across space. No words, no warning, just a line. Cross it and die. The first 3 ships did. They never had a chance. The dreadnought wasn't defending anymore. It was hunting. It didn't wait for threats. It predicted them. Briggs watched from the command deck, face unreadable. Harrow stood beside him, voice low. "We're alone out here, sir." Briggs shook his head. "Number, we're surrounded." "By who?" He turned toward the screen. "By the ghosts of everyone we couldn't save." And the ship surged forward. They thought a fleet could stop the dreadnought. 28 ships, cross-species, elite mercenaries, hired assassins, war criminals pulled out of prison for a final suicide mission. All armed to the teeth and ordered to do one thing: erase the symbol before it became something permanent. They barely made it through the first 10 minutes. What they hadn't understood was that the dreadnought wasn't built to fight fair. It was built for revenge. It didn't follow fleet logic. It didn't operate in formations or care about acceptable losses. It moved like a wolf in a pen of rabbits, slow at first, then sudden and unstoppable. The dreadnought was the last breath of a species tired of bleeding, and it made them bleed instead. Bodies drifted through space. Escape pods were ignored. The last ship tried to flee on silent mode. Briggs personally ordered a nuke fired straight into its engine trail. "No one walks away," he said, and no one did, except one. 2 days later, an envoy ship arrived at Earth, a standard diplomatic courier from the neutral accord of Nultris. Harmless, no weapons, no shields, just a small crew of peace envoys and language specialists. It never docked. It exploded 15 kilometers above the United Coalition Council Tower. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an accident. It was a message. Of the 12 people aboard, 3 were confirmed to be Nultris nationals. The other 9? Sindari covert operatives. The same Sindari who hadn't spoken openly in nearly 5,000 years. The same ones who once labeled humanity terminal risk. The assassination claimed 72 lives on the ground. One of them was Admiral Leona Farah, the woman who approved the original construction of the dreadnought, Earth's highest military strategist, the architect of humanity's space defense doctrine. When the bomb went off, she was walking into the council chambers with a data chip that was never recovered. Some said it held plans for the next generation of Earth's weapons. Others whispered it was something worse, a trigger protocol. Earth's mourning didn't last long, because by the time the smoke cleared, they knew what it meant. They weren't just feared. They were hunted. Back on the dreadnought, Briggs stood in the war chamber, eyes locked on the slow-rotating image of Earth's skyline, blackened by fire. The others waited for orders. No one spoke, no one needed to, because they all felt it in their bones. This is the last line. You could only lose so much before rage became identity. Briggs turned to the crew. "Earth has been attacked, from within, from above, from the same species that thought we'd forget what they did to us a century ago." He walked past the table, slow and heavy. "They blew up a council tower in the name of peace." He looked up at the glowing map, now marked with Sindari influence zones. "They think they can still dictate our future." The lights dimmed. "I say we show them what the future really looks like." He pressed a button. Every screen switched to black with one word flashing in red: Operation Black Dawn. Harrow stiffened. "Sir, that's not authorized." Briggs didn't turn. "It is now." Operation Black Dawn wasn't a military maneuver. It was a declaration. No more alliances. No more diplomatic tables. No more back-channel peace talks. Humanity would now enforce its own doctrine by its own terms. Every Terran ship was issued a single command: remove all Sindari presence from known space, without negotiation, without delay. The orders spread like wildfire. In mining colonies, humans turned on their Sindari supervisors and spaced them from airlocks. On trade routes, Terran convoys cut ties with Sindari carriers, blowing up shared cargo to make a point. In neutral zones, Marines in black armor walked into Sindari embassies and simply opened fire. The galaxy gasped, but no one intervened, because they all remembered the footage. The dreadnought wasn't just the tip of the spear, it was the whole blade, and no one wanted to be next. The Sindari, for the first time in millennia, responded. Not with words, with a fleet, 100 ships, a quarter of them unmanned AIs running on black algorithms outlawed by every known council. Each ship moved in perfect silence. No communications, no formation lights, just dark shapes across the void, like death coming quietly. They entered Terran-controlled space near Proxima Delta, expecting resistance. Instead, they found the dreadnought waiting. Alone. The Sindari fleet opened comms for the first time. A voice, robotic but laced with malice, spoke in every language at once. "You are a mistake that refuses to die." Briggs responded with 2 words. "Come closer." And then the dreadnought fired first. This time there were no warning shots. The entire front battery unleashed a storm of kinetic death. No flashy colors, no pretty lights, just mass, speed, destruction. The Sindari ships returned fire. The dreadnought took the first salvo head-on. Armor cracked, 2 decks flooded with fire, 6 men died, and then Briggs did something no AI would have predicted. He rammed the closest Sindari warship. No angle, no tactics, just fury with engines. The impact ruptured the enemy's power core. Both ships spun into a gravity well nearby. Briggs ordered all power redirected to thrusters and punched them through. The dreadnought crawled out the other side, flaming, limping, but still firing. 3 more Sindari ships went dark. The rest? They turned, not from strategy, but from fear. In the days that followed, the galaxy fractured. Some species declared neutrality. Some pledged loyalty to Earth just to avoid being next. Others joined the Sindari, out of ancient grudges or newer fears. But one thing was certain. Humanity was no longer a backwater species. They were a dominant force. Not because of numbers, not because of wealth, but because they refused to stay buried. Because they fought with a kind of rage that couldn't be taught. Because they didn't want glory. They wanted memory. They wanted to make sure no one ever forgot what it looked like when a planet rose from the ashes with steel teeth and blood in its mouth. Back aboard the dreadnought, Harrow stood alone in the observation deck. The stars were quiet again. But it wasn't peace. It was the calm between wars. Briggs walked up beside him, eyes sunken but sharp. "You still think we went too far?" he asked. Harrow shook his head. "I think we didn't go far enough." Briggs nodded. Then, finally, after all the noise, he said something he'd never said before. "We're not doing this for revenge anymore." Harrow looked over. "Then what are we doing it for?" Briggs stared out at the black. "To make sure the next time someone thinks about touching Earth," he clenched his fists, "they remember this moment and piss themselves before they even leave orbit." The Sindari had many names across the galaxy. Archivists, watchers, ghosts. But their truest name, the one buried beneath forgotten languages and forbidden texts, was cycle keepers. They didn't conquer for resources. They didn't enslave. They waited, centuries, sometimes millennia, watching civilizations rise, collapse, and reset themselves into obedience. If one grew too bold, too violent, too self-aware of its place in the galactic hierarchy, the Sindari came. And they cleaned. They'd done it to the Diraxi, once rulers of 5 arms of the spiral. Now, no ruins remained, not even language. Their entire existence compressed into a 6-sentence file inside a Sindari data chamber. The mistake with Earth? They hadn't cleaned deep enough. Within the black halls of the Sindari core world, 52 kilometers below the surface, the extinction protocol was activated. The weapon was not a bomb, not a virus, not even a machine. It was called Echo, a frequency-based neurological disruptor tuned to the human genome's emotional core, the one thing Earth had weaponized better than anyone else: grief. Echo would infect memory, twist it, shatter identity, strip away all sense of injustice, rage, history, vengeance. A generation raised under its signal wouldn't remember Titan, wouldn't remember Mars, wouldn't remember why they fought at all. Echo wouldn't kill the body. It would erase the soul. Sindari doctrine called it humane extinction, but there was nothing human about it. The first test fired on a human listening post in the rim. A dozen crew members collapsed instantly. Not dead, just hollow. They didn't move, didn't scream. They just stared, eyes wide, mouths slightly open, like the lights in their minds had gone out and weren't coming back. One wrote something before his hand gave out. 3 words. "Where am I?" Back on the dreadnought, Harrow stood in the medbay watching the footage. The man's face on the recording was slack, lifeless, but not from pain, from nothing. "Is this permanent?" Harrow asked. Dr. Olin, a former trauma surgeon from Earth's outer belt, didn't look up. "Yes." "What do we do?" The doctor shrugged. "If they'd killed them, we'd be angry. But this?" He gestured to the screen. "This terrifies people more. You can fight an enemy. You can't fight forgetting why you hate them." Briggs sat alone in his quarters, staring at a blinking message. Encrypted, unauthorized, buried beneath ghost code from pre-unification Earth. It shouldn't have even been reachable by dreadnought systems. But someone had forced it in. The message read, "They're not trying to win. They're trying to make you surrender without knowing you did." Operation Eden is already live. No sender, no trail, but Briggs knew that name. Eden. He'd seen it once before, in the same files Admiral Leona had been carrying when she was assassinated. He stood slowly, walked to the back of his cabin, opened a hidden wall panel. Inside was a single drive, unmarked. He'd sworn never to plug it in, but he was done with vows. Elsewhere on the dreadnought, the first sign of resistance stirred. It wasn't Sindari, it wasn't aliens, it was humans, crewmen, junior officers, technicians, people who'd once believed in the mission, and now wondered if it had become something else. A whisper spread. What if the dreadnought becomes the thing it was built to destroy? They met in storage rooms, airlock chambers, even unused duct spaces. They called themselves the Fracture. They didn't want to kill Briggs. They wanted to disable the ship. Send it home. Let Earth fight its own battles without dragging the rest of the species into a galactic firestorm. But they didn't know one thing. The dreadnought could hear them. Literally. The ship's early I cores had never been fully decommissioned. They weren't smart, not like real AI. But they listened, and they remembered. Briggs plugged in the unmarked drive. His screen went dark. A voice, not synthetic, not alien, spoke directly into his ear. Eden was our contingency. A series of visuals flashed. Weapons, human weapons, echo filters, memory armor, signal jammers that could neutralize the Sindari's extinction frequency. We built it the moment the first colony fell, back when Earth still had 20 governments fighting over scraps. We didn't tell Command. We didn't tell the Council. We buried it beneath the ice fields of Ceres, and then we erased the location. Briggs blinked. Another message flashed. Only the dreadnought was cleared to retrieve it. Because only you would be willing to use it. A set of coordinates appeared. Then the screen shut off. He stared at it for a long time. Then he called Harrow. "Set course for Ceres. Tell engineering to burn fuel like we're running from God." "Yes, sir. What's there?" "Insurance." But not everyone wanted that insurance found. In the deep depths of the dreadnought, a fracture agent planted his first virus. It was designed to trigger when the ship dropped into orbit around Ceres. One spark, and the dreadnought's main gun batteries would go offline for 6 hours, long enough for a fleet to intercept, long enough to force Briggs into surrender. He uploaded the payload, walked away, smiled, but as he turned the corner, he found a woman waiting for him. She was tall, thin, unarmed, just a cleaner. He relaxed until she snapped his neck. No emotion, no sound. She dragged the body into the wall panel. Behind her, the panel shut and locked with one word etched into the steel. Avalon. Avalon wasn't a person, not anymore. She'd been part of the AI division in the Martian resistance. Her mind was one of the first ever interfaced with a war machine. The process broke her. But she lived. Sort of. Now she operated from inside the dreadnought's subsystems. Half code, half ghost, all devotion. She didn't serve Earth. She served the mission, and the mission was simple. No more victims, no more silence, no more surrender. She purged the virus, silently, efficiently, and began scanning for others. The dreadnought would not fail. Not again. 3 days later, the ship reached the Ceres belt. What remained of the moon colony was buried beneath frozen metal and collapsed mining stations. No response, no signal, just silence, until Briggs spoke into the void. "This is Commander Briggs of the TSS Dreadnought. I'm requesting access to Protocol Eden." Nothing. Then, deep below the ice, something moved. The ice cracked, and the mountain opened. A hangar rose from beneath the surface. Inside it, black ships, small, silent, ugly, made for one thing, getting in fast and leaving a scar. At the center was a pod. Inside the pod, the core of Eden. Briggs stepped forward, put his hand on the scanner. It burned. Hard. The scanner blinked green. "Welcome back," it said. Harrow watched from the bridge, uneasy. They were loading weapons humanity had sworn never to use. "Sir," he said as Briggs returned. Briggs looked at him, eyes unreadable. "If we use these, we can't go back." Briggs lit his cigarette. "There's nothing left to go back to." Far away in the Sindari core, the AI sensed a shift. The extinction frequency would soon be useless. Earth had remembered how to defend its soul. So the Sindari activated their final fallback. Project Silence, not a weapon, a choice. Erase the galaxy entirely, reset every species, start the timeline again. It would take one spark, one planetary core, one chain reaction, and they had already chosen the target, Earth. They called it Project Silence for a reason. No sound, no flare, no warning. The Sindari launched the core seed from within a black ice satellite, drifting just beyond Saturn's rings. No engine heat signature, no mass surge. The device disguised itself as a spent fuel canister, indistinguishable from the debris field left behind by a mining convoy 2 decades earlier. And it moved slowly, deliberately, no faster than a drifting satellite. Because death, real extinction, didn't need speed. It needed certainty, its target, Earth's core, not to detonate, to infect. The Sindari didn't believe in flashy ends. They believed in unraveling, quiet endings, erasure without memory. Project Silence would sink into Earth's molten heart, breach the magnetic polarity, and dismantle the very electromagnetic frequency that gave the planet its unique evolutionary capacity for emotional cognition. No rage, no memory, no grief, just silence, the ultimate reset. But as the device crossed Mars's orbital path, something woke up. Not a sensor, not a radar net, something older, something angrier. The dreadnought didn't detect it through normal channels. It felt it. Briggs didn't sleep. He hadn't for 2 days, not since Eden had come online. He stood barefoot in the observation room, shirt soaked with sweat, eyes sunken and heavy. He hadn't blinked in minutes. Behind him, Avalon's voice came through the static speakers. "There's movement. Inner system, not ours. Not standard orbit debris." Briggs turned. "Show me." The display screen flickered. The object was tiny, cold, dead. But it moved with intention. Briggs knew it wasn't just a warhead. He'd seen those, fired them. This was something different, surgical. He narrowed his eyes. Put a rail round into its path, 10,000 kilometers ahead. No lock, just gravity shove. Avalon paused. "Why not destroy it? I want to see if it flinches." They fired. The slug passed 10,000 kilometers ahead of the object. The object twitched. Just once. Not evasive. Aware. Briggs clenched his jaw. "Now kill it!" The dreadnought launched a burst of magnetopulse flares, a pattern only Sindari AI used for synchronization. They answered. A full response signal came from the drifting object. Harrow read it from the war table. "It's a termination marker." "Of Earth?" Briggs asked. "No," Harrow said, voice low. "Of us. Of the entire Terran cognitive line." Avalon pulsed red. "They're not trying to end humanity. They're trying to erase it from the timeline." Back on Earth, the unified command was already falling apart. The Sindari's weapon hadn't struck yet, but the signal bleed from its presence, subtle distortions in neural resonance, micro changes in brainwave activity, was already spreading. Earth's capital suffered its first blackout since the fusion core came online 20 years ago. Hospitals reported mass confusion. Pilots forgot flight paths mid-air. People forgot the names of their children. They weren't dying, they were disconnecting. General Harlow screamed at the council screen. "Pull everything back. Full defense grid around the core." "It won't matter," said the science minister. "If that thing hits our field, we won't even remember how to resist." Someone asked, "Then what's the point?" And that's when the dreadnought responded. The ship came in fast. Too fast. A maneuver that should have broken its spine, only it didn't. The armor peeled back from its flanks. Dozens of black Eden drones burst from its hangars like a swarm of ancient hornets, each one locked onto a different point in Earth's magnetosphere. Small. Unstoppable. Avalon spoke over the global frequency. "This is not diplomacy. This is a firewall." The drones activated. The core field surged. A shell of resonance wrapped Earth like a cocoon of thunder. The incoming object twitched again, then stopped. Echo weapon. Null. Project Silence. Stalled. But not dead. Avalon whispered to Briggs from the CIC. "We bought time, that's all." Briggs nodded. "Then we spend it well." The Sindari didn't panic. They had no emotion. They simply changed tactics. Phase 2 of Project Silence was much simpler. Burn the planet. A Sindari dreadship, their oldest weapon, older than most living species, entered warp just inside the Oort cloud. It was called Sothara, built from a dead moon, powered by harvested suns, armed with what they called probability collapse engines, weapons that didn't fire beams but erased likelihoods. It had only been used once. The star system it destroyed was removed from galactic maps. They brought it out now for Earth. It would arrive in 12 hours, and it would end everything. The dreadnought received the alert 7 minutes after the jump signature was detected. It was the only Terran ship in position. Everyone else was too far, too slow, too late. Briggs didn't hesitate. "Burn all fuel. Get me intercept course." Harrow looked at him, bloodshot eyes widening. "Sir, this ship can't go head-to-head with that." Briggs nodded. "I know." Silence. "You're not planning on coming back, are you?" Briggs didn't answer. He turned to the comm panel, opened ship-wide channels. "Crew of the Dreadnought, listen close. This is the last call you'll get." He paused. This ship wasn't built to survive. It wasn't built to win. It was built to make them remember. That when you burn our homes, kill our children, erase our history, We don't die quietly. He looked across the bridge. We scream in your face and drag you to hell with us. The dreadnought hit burn velocity. Its hull screamed. Its engines wept. The Sindari dreadship emerged like a god from the dark. But the dreadnought did not stop. Avalon activated Eden. The black drones reconfigured. Inside the CIC, Harrow saw it happen. The ship's own structure began changing, armor folding, power surging inward, guns retracting. The dreadnought wasn't a battleship anymore. It was becoming a missile, a weapon with one target, Sothara. Briggs locked himself in the core chamber. He input the codes manually. His voice shook only once, when he saw Earth's blue curve on the rear cams. He whispered, "Never again." Then he hit launch protocol. Eden 0. The dreadnought struck the Sindari ship at near light speed. No explosion. Just silence. Then light. Then nothing. The galaxy held its breath. 1 minute, 2, 3. The Sothara was gone. No debris, no echo. Only silence. But not project silence. This was human silence. The kind that followed sacrifice. The kind that left scars. Earth survived. But they never rebuilt the dreadnought. They left the wreckage drifting above Ceres, the only fragment that didn't burn in the impact wave. Its front nameplate, charred, twisted, still read, Dreadnought. No prefix, no nation, no rank, just a word. One that now meant something no species would ever forget. Because the day the aliens saw a human battleship and regretted everything was also the day they learned how dangerous it is to leave a wounded species alive. Humanity didn't win because it was stronger. It won because it remembered. And because when the galaxy tried to erase their pain, humanity did something no one expected. It screamed louder, and it survived.